Welcome. Welcome to the Gemini High Priestess podcast. I'm Donna. This transmission moves at 432 Hertz. Here I offer insight into the art of relational light. The full moon is both a mirror and a culmination, a sacred moment when what is hidden in the lunar field is revealed in the solar light of consciousness. I speak from the wadawurrung land. In moving with country, I honour the First Nations people, their devotion to land, to water, to community. I pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, to elders past, present and emerging. My intention is simple yet profound, to share practical examples of sacredness lived, of self-awareness, of emotional and spiritual connection. These are not abstractions, they're threads that enrich our lives, weaving purpose and meaning into the everyday. The insights I share arise through lived experience, through cycles of devotion, through deep inner listening. At times I call upon the support of AI tools like GHP, not to replace, but to refine and illuminate what already flows within the sacred current of this work. All transmissions remain rooted in soul, in sovereignty, and in ritual intent. This season, I turn towards the tension of opposites. The sun speaks of identity, expression, leadership, and the moon, well, it whispers of our emotional needs, our longing for belonging. Between them a dialogue unfolds, a dance of light and shadow, a mirror of the human heart. This episode, I'll be starting with a poem. Do you know where you end and others begin? Sometimes it's obvious. A stranger passing by, not looking, not seeing. An acquaintance you rarely touch in any meaningful way. But I'm talking about when you love them. When you hold a child. When you sit with a friend in heartbreak. When you meet your partner in intimacy. When your hand rests on your furry animal family at the end of a day. When you walk through nature, trees, ocean, river, wildlife, and feel watched, held, included. These are moments I'm not so sure. I can see the physical edge, skin, space, form, but the transfer of attention, of love, it's not so clear. Connection becomes an exchange, subtle, sacred, too precious to ignore. And in these moments, I soften. I feel as one, tethered to something greater than myself, in harmony. Not less of me, but more. More than whole, I belong. I belong to myself, and I belong to others. moments, that space where connection softens the edges of where we begin and end, this is the space of the full moon that is illuminating. A full moon in Libra with the sun in Aries, and that axis of other and self, connection and identity, harmony and assertion. You may already feel where this lives in you. The moments where connection feel natural, easy, like flow, and the moments where something in you goes quiet, where your needs soften or disappear altogether. I've been noticing this in my own life, where I offer attention, where I hold space, and where, without even realizing it, I place myself second. Not in a big, obvious ways, but in subtle ones, the ones that accumulate over time. And as we move towards this full moon, I'm not rushing to change it. I'm observing it. I'm tracking where I feel open and where I feel the quiet pull to return to myself. Because this full moon doesn't ask us to choose self or other. It asks us to become conscious of the space in between. And for me, this is being lived in real time. I recently stepped into the role of Earth Space Guardian at the Seven Sisters Festival, literally holding space in the mornings and tending to the land, being present with others while staying anchored in myself. And already I can feel it, the practice of noticing, of choosing, of gentle recalibrating, and where I stand within that connection. Not pulling away, not overgiving, but learning what it actually means to belong to myself while being in relationship with others. At this full moon, what's happening in the collective is that Libra Aries energy is about negotiation, diplomacy, and justice versus the direct action and personal initiative. So this is the public discourse, leadership challenges or boundary setting in social contexts, and they may feel amplified. And this is the collective urge to balance personal needs with social fairness, and impatience and rashness is possible. So, I want to make it very clear about the journey and the 432 Hertz of harmonic foundation. So this is the third in this frequency series, and with each recording, the body begins to recognize the resonance, settling more easily into the state of balance and receptivity. This frequency supports a sense of coherence, inviting awareness into the space between self and other, and where listening, attunement, and presence naturally arise. Alongside this, the drum carries its own living rhythm, responsive, intuitive, and grounded, and it doesn't follow a fixed pattern. It meets each moment as it unfolds, reflecting the subtle dance between connection and individuality. Together, they've created a field of relational balance, supporting you to remain anchored in yourself while gently opening into the exchange that exists between you and the world around you. So, Seven Sisters. So this was a 4-day festival that was held in regional Victoria that I recently volunteered at. There was lots of really great, juicy things that happened over those 4 days, and I'm just going to talk about some of them and what that means to me. So I want to talk about relational intelligence, that is self and others. So as a space guardian, I had to have and focus on myself. That is, I was the foundation of the container. So relational intelligence always begins with self-responsibility. So I arrived prepared physically, emotionally, and energetically. I listened to my body. I was still dealing with pain that I'd had previously. However, there was no medication, and I adjusted my tent for support. I stayed in my lane, responsible for my space and myself and not others' experiences. And I moved from instinctively holding to conscious present. So the insight I got from this is that I cannot hold others safely if I am not anchored in myself. And self-awareness is that first boundary. Others, meeting without carrying. So true connection doesn't require an overreach. So I was able to support a pregnant woman with cushions. I was able to respond to her without overstepping. I was assisting facilitators with the tech and the setup without taking over their role. I was witnessing others' emotions, grief, vulnerability, counselling without absorbing them. The insight that I saw was relational intelligence is the ability to care without control, and support does not mean responsibility for outcomes. The next was the field between, holding what was unspoken. So what happens between people matters the most. So I was literally being described as in my element, so others felt regulated around me. A conversation that I had actually gave someone goosebumps, so that truth was landing literally in the body. If you can imagine, I was crocheting while dancing, becoming part of the collective field, not separate from it. And the insight I gained was we're always influencing the relational field, consciously or unconsciously, and presence shapes the experience more than words. Boundaries, creating safety but not restriction. So safety allows for openness, observing the shift in a confrontational space where clear consent and structures were present. And my cousins involved movement from discomfort to curiosity within 12 hours. The insight, freedom only works when the container is strong, and boundaries don't limit connection, they make it possible. So lineage and reflection, so seeing self through others. So relationships are mirrors across time. So I was witnessing a mother-daughter connection that invoked grief and gratitude for my own mother. I recognized inherited love, where I realized how magnificent my mother was, and therefore how I am also magnificent. That feeling of belonging, not from others, but within myself. So the insight was relational intelligence includes understanding of what we carry forward. We don't just relate as individuals, we relate as lineage. Belonging, the outcome of integrated relating. So the result is not connection, it's self-belonging. So dancing, crocheting, moving freely without seeking validation. Being approached and not chasing connection, and feeling at home in myself within a shared space. So the insight was when self and others are held in balance, belonging emerges naturally, not something to earn, something to realize. I think that my regulated nervous system was doing more than keeping me steady. It was setting the tone for everyone around me. And this is the part that most people don't realize. Humans are constantly reading each other beneath the words through breath, posture, tone, pace. This is known in psychology as our nervous system syncing with one another for cues of safety or threat. So how did this look for me? So I am the anchor, self. When I'm regulated, my breath is steady. My movements are intentional, not reactive. My tone is calm and clear. My energy is contained, not leaking. My body signals there is no immediate threat here. And that's not something that I say, it's something that others feel. So what's happening in others? That is the relational field. people around me unconsciously attune to that signal. Someone anxious begins to slow down without knowing why. Someone overwhelmed feels less alone in their experience. Someone unsure feels safe enough to make a decision. Someone emotional can express without escalating. I'm not fixing them. I'm giving their system permission to settle. And this is especially visible in moments I've already experienced. For example, the pregnant woman softening when I supported her, other space guardians feeling safe enough to open and respond emotionally, and my cousin shifting when the container became structured and regulated. So why this works? A regulated nervous system acts like a reference point in environments where emotions are high, energy is shifting, or people are processing. My steadiness becomes the baseline others orient to. It's like being a ground wire in an electrical system. The excess charge can dislodge safely because something stable is present. So the boundary, that makes it work. This only works because I'm not overextending. I don't absorb what's not mine. I don't rush to fix. I don't abandon myself to meet others. And that's what keeps my system regulated. If I crossed that boundary, I'd lose the anchor. And the deeper truth is, I'm not regulating others actively. I'm regulating myself consistently. And that consistency creates trust, safety, and space, so others can return to themselves. And my regulated nervous system doesn't control others. It offers a steady place for them to return to themselves. And as where my experience is that I knew what was mine, and just as importantly, what wasn't, and therefore allowing others to step into their responsibility. So the core boundary, I'm responsible for the space in myself. So this was my anchor before I even went to the festival. I named it clearly. I'm not responsible for authority, content, or the participants. And this meant I didn't overfunction. And I didn't anticipate others' needs unnecessarily. So what I did, I held my role clearly. What it allowed? Others, that is the facilitators, the participants, to own their own roles and experiences. Next, tech issues and the presenter. So there was an issue where the headset didn't work. I adapted. I used what was available and spoke with people who could help me. The presenter arrived early. Again, I supported, I set up, I had the music projector, and I handed that over to the next space guardian. So what I did was I responded to what was right in front of me without stretch or overreach. What I didn't do is that I didn't take over the session or assume responsibility for the content. So what it allowed? The facilitator to lead their space, fully supported but not overridden. So supporting the pregnant participant, I noticed the discomfort and I brought cushions and offered support. So what I did is I met the physical need with care and immediacy. What I didn't do is that I didn't take responsibility for her entire experience or, importantly, her emotional state. What it allowed was her to find her own comfort and remain in her process with support. Now the team coordination with other space guardians. So I had clear communication with the next shift space guardian and supporting shared needs, that is the equipment and flow. So what I did is stayed collaborative and reliable. What I didn't do, I didn't micromanage or assume that others weren't capable. And what it allowed? A functional team where everyone contributed without hierarchy distortion. My cousin in the confronting workshop shift. I asked about her experience, and I shared my understanding of a container and presence. So what I did was offered a perspective without persuasion. What I didn't do is I didn't try to convince her or change her view. And what it allowed, gave her space to process, feel the difference, and come to her own conclusion. Observing without inserting. So I went to a sensory TED and also had counselling, should you need it. And I heard a woman speaking with her counsellor nearby. What I did was stay present and grounded and aware. What I didn't do, I didn't step in, I didn't interrupt, and I didn't take responsibility that wasn't mine. And what this allowed was the integrity of that relationship and that space to remain intact. There was the issue around loss of property. I noticed, retrieved, and returned meaningful items. So what I did is I closed a practical loop that was mine to act on. What I didn't do is I didn't ignore it or assume someone else would handle it. And what it allowed was care and trust to extend through small, grounded actions. Personal regulation in the environment. I had to rearrange my tent for my body. I removed the awning to reduce stress on my system because it was windy. So what I did, I took responsibility for my physical well-being. What I didn't do, well, I didn't push through the discomfort or expect the environment to change for me. What it allowed? Sustained presence without depletion. So the pattern across all of these moments was that I acted when it was mine. I paused when it wasn't. I supported without taking over, and I observed without absorbing. So this insight is that most people confuse care with responsibility. And what I demonstrated is that care equals responsive, present, and appropriate. Responsibility equals clear, bounded, and self-led. And because I held that line, others were able to step into their own responsibility without interference. Relational intelligence is not about managing others. It's about knowing where I end and others begin. Holding space without losing myself. Allowing connection without control. And returning again and again to self. I learned that knowing what is mine to hold is what allows others to hold themselves. As this full moon settles, you may notice where you feel connected and where you need to return to yourself. Not as a separation, but as a remembering that you can be in relationship without leaving your own center, that you can offer presence without abandoning your needs, that balance is not something you find once, but it's something you feel moment by moment in the space between you and another. This is the practice I am in, not perfect, not complete, but aware, choosing gently where I stand and how I meet what is in front of me. As you move through your own relationship, your own spaces of connection, notice what shifts. When you include yourself in the exchange. You don't need to withdraw to belong to yourself. You only need to remain. right here. Thank you. Thank you for your presence with me today. I appreciate your focus, your attention, as you bear witness to my self-expression and my wisdom. My hope is simple, that you gained something important from the episode and that you found it valuable. Please follow this podcast, select follow, tap on the notification bell. Be reminded when a new episode rises. Be mindful, dear listener. If this episode has stirred difficult emotions or memories or thoughts, seek support from family, from friends, from professionals if you need it. If you wish to share feedback, I welcome your voice. Comments are open. You may reach me by email at geminihighpriestess@outlook.com. You can also find me on Instagram at geminihighpriestess. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Move with your country. Stay present. Speak honestly. Honor your connections. And I will meet you at the next rising of the full moon.